He's angry about mortgages. It's Angry Mortgage. He's swearing. He's cursing loud. He's old. He's opinionated. And he's been doing this so damn long. This program is about mortgages, and this is mortgage advice, but the advice may not apply to your situation. Contact licensed mortgage professionals for specific recommendations before you make decisions about mortgages. You may not agree with Ron, but if you don't, he thinks you're wrong. Oh, and did we say there is a lot of swearing?
And we're back with a special guest, Vince Gaetano. How many times have you been on the show now, Vince?
I think it's the third time.
Yeah.
So I feel lucky.
There's a certain amount of complaints coming from people who've been on the show before, not from Vince, but others have voiced the concept that there's no fucking Angry Mortgage swag. So anyway, let me properly introduce Vince. Vince Gaetano, Owl Mortgage, very well known. You were on like CP24 forever, right?
19 years. Almost 2 decades.
Do you have some kind of a NDA? You can't mention the other brokerage or you're good?
I think I could mention them now.
All right, so it's Monster Mortgage. Vince was the guiding light and resident genius at Monster Mortgage, and he decided, fuck it, I'm going to be on my own. So, he
well, not quite like that.
Owl Mortgage. Well, we don't have to go into all the gory details, right? I mean, like, come on. Although, isn't the guy's son showing up on the CP24 now?
I don't know. I don't watch it.
You don't watch it at all?
No, I don't watch it anymore.
All right. I end up. We're actually CP24 sort of news people.
It's on at like 9 p.m. now or something. It's past my bedtime.
Yeah. And Al Sinclair, even though he was about 70,
he's up there.
Yeah,
I don't think he's quite 70, but
he's in his 60s.
He still plays hockey.
Still plays hockey?
Yeah.
Well, his hair is as black as can be. Okay. Like he doesn't have a single gray hair in his head.
Doesn't age.
Doesn't age?
Doesn't age.
But it's not shoe polish.
No.
Okay. No. Just checking. I want to make sure. So anyway, Vince has got it all on his own now. Owl Mortgage, very successful mortgage brokerage, good big social media presence. What's your show
Not as
called?
big as you though.
It's big. It's big. So what's your show called?
Wise Old Owl Show.
Wise Old Owl Show. Okay. He's not as, sometimes he's mad, but he's never as angry as we are on Angry Mortgage. And by the way, I'm Ron Butler, because apparently I got to announce it every fucking time, even though if you come to the show, what else would you think? Okay. But anyway, so today we got a lot of news. There's a lot to cover. Vince has a really, really interesting specialized area that he works in today. And it's just a glimpse into the bureaucracy that keeps holding back housing. So we're going to have a good talk about that. But let's start with the news of the new renewal rules.
Great news.
It's great news.
Long overdue.
So long overdue. So what it is, folks, is that, and I'm going to actually run through it from soup to nuts. I'm going to start at A and go all the way to Z. See, I still say Z. I don't say Z. I'm not American.
I'm Zed.
Oh, you're still Zed? Okay. There's a bunch of 28-year-olds who, well, maybe there's three. There's three 28-year-olds who are saying, what the fuck is Z? It's Z. Okay. But, you know, we were raised with Z.
Exactly.
Okay. I'm going to go A to Z. So let's start with how renewals work. So this is really important because there are people listening who've never had a mortgage and there are people listening who want to get a mortgage. So we'll talk about how renewals work. We don't have a 25-year or 30-year mortgage in Canada. Like every time you get overlap from the United States, you're always hearing about, yeah, I got a 30-year mortgage and it's $299. Haha, fuck the world. Okay, like
those are gold.
They are
from a
gold.
Few years ago.
Now it's interesting. They come from about the same time as our super low rates came from. Here's something interesting. When the Americans were getting 30-year mortgages for $299, we were selling 5-year mortgages for $159.
Yeah.
So there is like still a significant interest rate difference.
But I take that $299 all day long.
Hindsight, yeah, hindsight. You know, we went through 15 years of the zero interest rate period. Okay, like there was like interest rates were like always less than 4 forever.
Borrow forever.
So I remember back then. You know what? You remember too, Vince. There was moments in time when people talked about interest rates going to zero. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Because in a couple of countries, Scandinavian countries, I think in Denmark, the bank paid you to take a mortgage.
Somebody was negative. I think it was Japan.
It was negative, yeah. No, it was Denmark for sure.
It was Denmark or Switzerland?
Japan is just pretty much, on mortgages, they actually pay. They actually pay like 1 or 2% interest on mortgage. But in Denmark, they actually, for a short period of time, they paid you to take a mortgage. I got a lot of people out, listeners and viewers, who are saying this guy's high. This butler is high.
Well, you know what, Ron, if you think about it, back in 89, 90 at Canada Trust, we used to have mortgage burning parties.
Yeah. People would pay off their mortgage.
People were encouraged to pay off their mortgage. They get a little kit. They go burn their mortgage in the backyard with some s'mores.
Right. So, that folks, back then, it was the 90s, right?
Yeah,
you got to remember,
90s.
Folks, in the 70s and 80s, you could buy a house in Toronto for $118,000 and a sack of potatoes. Okay, like the potatoes were like. So,
and it was a big house,
so you could burn your fucking mortgage. If you bought a house in 1979, no problem.
No problem.
That was a very inexpensive home. Okay, and a nice home.
$100,000, you'd have a nice house.
A nice house for $100,000. All right, so the story of renewals. So in Canada, we don't have the 30-year. We don't have the 20-year terms. We have typically 5-year has been very popular. 3 has been popular recently. 3-year fixed, 5-year fixed, 5-year variable. But there's 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year. We have all those. In the concept of lending, you actually do think of that as short-term lending. I mean, obviously 1 year is very short, but even 5-year,
it's not a whole lot of time.
A whole lot of time. So what happens is that nobody buys a house, gets a mortgage, and doesn't need a renewal because you
sneaks up on you.
You have a 5-year. So what happens at renewal? You know what happens at renewal, Vince. You get a notification from your lender, right? 30,
60, 90 days before maturity. 100%. They surprise you.
Yes, that's absolutely
Your
right.
life's busy.
But you do, they approach you. They tell you your day is coming when you must renew, and the system has always been that you receive a message. And let's just talk about banks for the time being.
They always send you shitty rates.
They send you shitty rates off the hop, but you do get them. You get them, like you said, 90 days. They start phoning. Some of them do 60 days. You have to get a message from them with an offer 30 days in advance. Those are the rules, okay? And here's the wild part, folks. I just want you to listen to this bit. If you've never had a mortgage, this might strike you as interesting. When you're offered this renewal, they don't even ask you if you're still working.
Nope.
Nada.
They're basically basing it on your payment history.
If you've got solid payment, you won't get a renewal if you're in arrears. Yeah, that's correct. If you're in arrears, they'll kick you out of the house.
You're making your payments; they just send you a renewal.
It's automatic. I want you to remember this part, folks, because it's key. Important. This is really key.
Yeah,
we have an automatic renewal system from banks in Canada. Now you might say, "Whoa, that sounds dangerous." Okay, statistically, it is not. Vince knows, and I know that mortgage renewals are the lowest default item in the whole menu of mortgages.
Absolutely. And you've built up equity.
You've got equity. You've got a payment history. If you're going to run into trouble because you overpaid or you overbought, or you stretched too much, you get in trouble in the first couple of years, not the last year.
Correct.
Okay. So you get a perfect payment history. You've built up equity, and it's 5 years later. You may have got a promotion. One person in the couple might have got a new better job.
Yeah.
Okay. So the mortgage is smaller, right? The mortgage is smaller.
It's smaller, and now that
because you paid it down,
and now that we've passed the 5-year mark since stress tests have come into play, that mortgage was stress test at the beginning
100%
of the exercise.
100%.
So you got wiggle room.
So what we're trying to say, people, is that the reason that there's no. By the way, it's an interesting story. The brilliant leader of the bank regulator in Canada,
Peter Rutledge,
the boss at OFSI, it's the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions. A few years ago, Peter Rutledge, brilliant man that he is, floated the idea to Canadians and to banks and to the Department of Finance in Ottawa. Maybe we should do this. Maybe we should re-underwrite these mortgages. Maybe we should ask to have really strong mortgages. We should be asking whether or not we should we income test? Should we go in and ask banks to collect new income information when the mortgage renewals? This is about 4 or 5 years ago.
And then somebody may have tapped him on the shoulder and says, Peter, you may want to hold that thought, because if somebody doesn't qualify and they can't go anywhere, what do we do?
Yeah, I kind of know exactly what happened at that time when that is exactly as you described. He put that out into the world. The finance minister at the time, Bill Morneau, gave him a call and said, "Hey, Peter, shut the fuck up and withdraw that right now. Tell everybody, no, we've studied it and we're not doing it, okay? Because even though Bill Morneau he was no savant about the finance business. I mean, Bill Morneau was actually the luck of the sperm draw. Like his dad built a huge successful company and Bill took it over. I'm not saying Bill's dumb, but he's not his dad. Okay. So he said, no, we're not doing that. Because just to what you said, what if one of the people, there's a husband and wife, or there's two partners, and one of them's just temporary off, they just out of work at that point. They just got laid off. They're looking for something new. They're
Mat leave,
or just somebody's just between jobs. Okay, so now we're gonna say, no mortgage for you. Like, even though you paid perfectly, no mortgage for you, so we're kicking you out.
Let's create a problem.
Yes, let's develop, and let's make sure that once it gets into the media, we're going to make sure everybody understands that the government supports the idea of throwing people who've paid their mortgages perfectly out of their house.
Exactly.
So Bill Morneau gave Peter Rutledge a call and said, I guess I'm paraphrasing, but smarten the fuck up is about the size. And that idea was quickly dropped. Like, within 2 weeks, it was over with. Okay? So there's a reason we don't do it in Canada. It's because it's too disruptive, too crazy. And the statistical proof is that of renewing mortgages has gone through one renewal. They have a default rate that's so low, it's even hard to find it.
Probably non-existent.
Non-existent. It's like 2 basis points or something. It's absolutely ridiculous. So if you're not running a 25 and 30 year term, you got to have automatic renewals, which that explanation gets us to this point. This point is that for the last 5 years, the same godsend of the mortgage industry, Peter Rutledge, has been saying, no, we got to stress test anybody who wants to switch. So let's talk about what a switch is. You got a mortgage, you paid it down, and you now get your renewal notice. We talked about it. A bunch of terms here. You can have a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5 year variable, fixed. You pick it, and here's a bunch of rates. And you might look at the rates as a borrower, as a consumer, and say, I don't like those fucking rates. I'm going to shop.
Yeah.
So you can call other banks. You can go to these rate sites. They're called like Rate Hub and Wawa. And these rate sites have every kind of rate in Canada on them. And who has the best, lowest rate? They show you all the spreads of all the types. And you can pick. You can investigate. But Peter Rutledge, in his wisdom, up until couple of days ago, said, you've got to be stress tested. Now, you're going to add 2%. Every time you want to get that, shop around, find a better rate, get that mortgage, first of all, you got to provide all new income. This is not an automatic anymore.
No, it's a full underwrite.
Yeah, it's a full underwrite, all your income, pay stubs, job letter, call the employer, maybe a blood test. No, maybe. No, I'm kidding. There's no blood test.
But everybody's going to say, but rates were really low back then. I said, okay, well, everybody was stress tested 5.25.
Back then. Okay.
Back then. So rates are relatively less than that right now.
Today? Yeah,
in the fours. So they're still kind of stress test anyways on income from 5 years ago.
Sure. So here's the real killer point. If you're the existing bank who has the mortgage, you don't even care if the person's employed. You're not even asking that question. And here's the bank with the better rate. They have to look at they got to study your income down, and they got to make sure they got to stress test. It made no sense to stress test it because you had the incumbent bank saying, we don't even fucking care if you're working. So obviously there's no stress test. We're not asking you any income question. So there's no stress test for us. So you had the chance to get a better rate. And in about between 12 and 15% of the cases, you are prevented from getting the better rate by the stress test. Okay.
And let's put things into perspective. A half a point difference on a $500,000 home is $2,500 a year, $12,500 over the term in straight line math. That's after tax income you got to use to service that.
All after tax.
Right?
All right.
So it's a big issue.
It's because it's fundamentally anti-consumer. I know there's a few people watching the podcast, watching the YouTube, listening to the podcast, who are going to say, no. We want to have total safety. We want to stress test those people. It's important. Remember what I said. The existing bank didn't even ask if they were working. They didn't know. They didn't know if there was any income coming into the household. They didn't care. They didn't have to. So are we not capturing, or does that bank know that they can offer higher rates to their customers because a certain percentage of them can't escape due to the stress test?
And some of them know. They have the algorithms in their bank account to see if pay goes in.
Or they can do a soft credit pull.
Yes.
There's lots of things they can do. Look, folks, it's just like this. It was unfair. It's completely unfair.
Uncompetitive.
Okay? It's uncompetitive. It's unfair. And if we have 6 big banks in Canada that do 84% of all transactions, I know sometimes you don't realize it's the bank. Like when you use a credit card, a store credit card, in the end, it's a bank.
Yep.
When you get your mortgage from a company that might not be a bank on the surface,
monolines.
If they have supplied the money. They got their money to do your mortgage from a bank. Okay, so with just 6 entities handling 84% of the financial transactions,
they control everything.
We got to encourage some competition.
Yes.
Okay, so finally, after, I won't tell the story because I don't. I sometimes people make a mistake and think I actually do things. Like I have testified in Parliament about the. We'll talk about that in a second. About the anti-fraud.
You're a big proponent on this stuff.
I'm a big proponent of this stuff. I do have it fortunate. I'm very fortunate that sometimes politicians ask me questions. Sometimes people in government ask me questions. And sometimes some of the people who are going to be in new governments ask me questions. But
it's good.
The bottom line is that I have pushed for this because, hey, everybody who's watching and listening, we need better consumer protection in Canada. We've got what do we got? Like we got 3 companies supply all the cable and telephone, cellular in the country, right? 3
grocers.
We got 3 grocery stores.
Yeah.
We got that's fucking nuts. Okay, we got 6 banks,
gas stations.
We got 3 gas stations. Yeah. Like holy shit, we got the most oligarchical country in the world. Okay, that's a long tongue twister.
That's a mouthful.
But too many monopolies, duopolies, and oligarchies where it's just concentration of businesses that control your life. Okay, so we've got to encourage competition everywhere. Okay, it's sensible, right?
This is all good. This is good news. It's a
good
news story.
All good news story.
So shop.
So thank you, Department of Finance, who I know made the call to Mr. Peter Rutledge, who's been lying about these things for the entire 5 years. He always said, no, it's absolutely necessary to protect these banks, to make sure that, we have to do everything right. Dude, the existing bank never even asked if they were working, okay? So you knew that. You actually knew that.
He knows.
So you were lying to everybody the whole time. That's the truth. Okay, so good news to everybody. It's easier to move your mortgage now at renewal. Again, just a quick reminder, you can't increase the mortgage. Increasing the mortgage is different. The stress test comes back.
Straight transfer.
Okay? It's just if your balance is $355,260, that's what moves. You switch that to a new bank at a better rate. That's the concept. All right. We also had moving forward on the mortgage fraud file. Okay. Quick summary. Good news. Also good news this week. Quick summary. Mortgage document fraud is when people provide fake documents to lending institutions with higher incomes in order to qualify for mortgages. So they've got a mortgage that if they showed their actual income, they get turned down for. Okay. This is very prevalent. It's I'm not saying it's 10% of mortgages. It's not. But even 3% is too many, right?
Well, I always tell people it creates a problem when someone is bidding for a home with a reputable buyer and they're up against someone committing fraud. They're going to pay more for it if they're bidding back and forth for that property because someone's not supposed to be getting that mortgage because they got fake income. And it creates a very problematic situation. And nobody knows what's going on. But we understand. We see it every day, Ron. Mm-hmm. We're seeing fraud. We get calls. Hey, do you do document fraud? Like once a week.
I guess I've established myself enough we don't get those calls.
But it's sad. It's like, get the fuck out of my face. Like, don't even lose my number.
Okay, by the way, that's a fantastic point Vince just made. If you have the ability to qualify for any mortgage because your income documents are fake, there's a tendency for prices to run up.
Yes.
So it's just another contributing
Absolutely.
factor to batshit crazy high house prices in Canada. And simultaneously, Vince hit on the other crucial thing, which is the fairness issue. You got a fucking young couple who have done everything right, saved up their money, worked hard at their jobs, got promotions, made more money.
Absolutely.
And they can barely qualify. And some dipshits who are using fake documents, they can buy anything they want. Okay?
That's a problem.
All wrong. Got to end. Now, let me just touch on one thing that I want to point out. So the stage we got to last week was that CRA actually announced their proposal to study this. Okay?
It's a step.
It's a step. All right. So now, and by the way, there's if you're in the mortgage business, or if you they got a website up, so you can make your comments on this and give your ideas. I know a lot of people have contacted me and said, "Well, Ron, you got to jump right on that. You got to put your comments in there."
You're ahead of the game.
Like, in reality, I'm a small part of the reason that the website's up. So everybody in Ottawa knows my feelings on this. CRA doesn't need to hear from me. It's really simple. We want to verify one single number.
One number.
That's all this is, folks. Like, everybody says, I don't want anybody seeing my tax. I don't want mortgage brokers seeing my tax. That's fine. Okay. Quickly explain. You sign a waiver. In order to get the mortgage, you got to give all your income documents. You got to
do it anyways.
You got to give your T1 generals. You got to give your notice of assessments. You got to give all these documents in order to get the mortgage. Everybody knows this. This is the way it works with every bank. And we want to verify one single number. So you've submitted a whole tax return in order to get your mortgage. And we would just want one number confirmed by CRA.
Line 15,000.
15000. There's a number there. We simply, the bank, and not me, not mortgage brokers, not us.
Let the bank send it in.
Banks, credit unions, absolutely recognized financial institutions would ping that off CRA. Your name, your SIN number, your birth date. And there's that one number, the number that says your net taxable income. Ping it off CRA. CRA just pings back yes or no.
Yea or nay.
That's it.
Simple.
It's true, it's false. It's so simple. Privacy commissioner can't fight it. Nobody can fight it. But because the government bureaucracy is fucked in the head, they got to go through a whole process of saying, what do you all think? Tell us your ideas.
6 months to a year of
6 months,
consultation,
7, 8 months,
review.
consultations, carry on. Here's the true thing about government, folks, and I know you see it every day. You see it municipal, you see it provincial, you see it everywhere you go. Federal, big time. Complexity, expense, waste, foolishness. The best idea is already established. The solution to the problem is there, and government at all levels says, okay, wait. We need to ask everybody else what they think their solution would be. We need to study that. We need to have 6 committees study that because we need big payroll. Okay. We have the solution. It's there. Again, it's a good first step. We will, because folks, I'm never giving up. I'm never stopping. No. We will eventually kill mortgage fraud in this country, which brings us to another topic that we talked about before the show. You know, banks have taken this on to themselves. I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but I'm gonna explain it to you. Right now, banks are asking people who supply pay stubs, people who supply job letters to verify their income, people who supply T4s, but mostly on the pay stub, the pay statement, your Ceridian statement, your ADP statement, whoever it is, or your, God help you if it's the government's Phoenix program, but I mean, like, God help you there. But banks are now asking to see 3 months bank statements showing the deposits of your payroll.
Makes sense.
And this is up to about 40% of banks right now. I think by the middle of next year, it'll be 100%. So why are they doing this? Okay, so they take your pay stubs and they compare them to the deposits. Now, you might say, but Ron, come on, Ron. You know, these fraudsters are so good. If the pay stub's are fake, they just make up fake bank statements. And they're experts at that. And they are experts at that, by the way. But in the background, the banks are simply submitting that bank statement to the other bank who produced the bank statement. Like if you're RBC, you're asking CIBC, hey, these are bank statements from you, from CIBC. Are they legit? And like 95% of the time, it's just a ping back. Yep, they're good. They'll
be coded. They'll be coded properly.
Yep. And then every once in a while, it'll be, nope, fakes.
Nope.
Now, some people might jump up and say, wait a second, that's infringing on my privacy. Stop for a second. Remember, you willingly gave up these bank statements. Okay. And here's one thing that's true. You might not know this about bank statements, but folks, you don't own your own bank statement. The bank owns it. There's privacy, yes. But when you sign the waiver at the bank to get your mortgage, and when you give them the documents, the waiver you sign says they are free to confirm them in any way they wish.
That's right. Third party.
Third party. Okay. And who cares? Like if your bank statements are legit, do you give a shit? You don't give a shit.
You just want the mortgage.
Just want the mortgage. So, hey, some of you mortgage brokers and agents out there who listen to this show who might be involved, I know that's a small number, but it's a few who might be involved in the fake document business.
Days are numbered.
That we're closing in. Yep, we're closing in. And I know people are going to say, Ron, the banks really support it. Hey, guess what? The banks don't support mortgage fraud. And here's the proof. They're using this system to verify pay stubs now on their own, all on their own.
And it levels the playing field for fairness.
For honesty, for good people who should qualify.
Exactly. And
maybe if we kick enough fraud out of the mortgage business, that there'll be less bids on houses at ridiculous.
Agreed. 100%.
So it's all nothing but good. But folks, it's coming. Everybody who said, man, you've been saying that for 10 years.
But Ron, I want to applaud you because you put in a lot of time and effort in Ottawa. You've been down there multiple times.
Oh, yeah.
That takes time, effort, money. You're on your own dime in most cases to get there.
Oh, you get when you testify before Parliament, you get a small amount of money back. So thank you, Parliament.
But it's great that you're putting in the time in because you're doing it for the right reason. So,
look, it's been the cause of my time for the last decade, and it's really, really simple. We want fairness in the mortgage industry. Vince and I, we go back a long ways. Okay?
Yes.
And you and I were appalled during the course of, say, 2010 through 2015, 16, to see the amount of foreign money that poured into Toronto, poured into Vancouver, poured into places. And we watched people just snapping, overbidding because the money was coming from another country and they didn't care. Canada was being used as a piggy bank. It was being used as a safety deposit box for foreign nationals. Okay. And now that's fallen off quite a bit. There's a lot of reasons behind that. China's closed down. They don't want to let money out of China anymore.
The monument they put up is FinTrack.
Yep. And so, look, we fought that, and it sort of went away. It's still around. It's not completely gone. No. I mean, there's a whole bunch of houses big mansions up in a certain suburb of northern Toronto that might have the people behind those homes might actually have close relatives in the Revolutionary Guard in Iran. But look, it's apparently I've just got a warning on my phone that there's a sniper coming to the office here. But anyway, the reality is you fight the fight for fairness.
Yes,
because 95% of everybody's honest. They're honest. So why are they taking a backseat to fraudsters?
And there hasn't been a lot of teeth with regulators in the past. It seems like it's slowly changing, but we're moving in the right direction, which is good.
Absolutely true. So, Vincent, you and I both noticed that it looks like house unit sales, like the number of houses being sold in the GTA is definitely up.
Unit sales?
Unit sales, yeah. Unit sales.
Pre-con or resale?
Oh, pre-con's dead as a fucking doornail. I'm talking about resale.
Yeah, they're up.
Okay, yeah, they're up.
They made a little move in October.
There's been some, and we're going to see it again in this November too. Definitely both in Vancouver and in, because it was fucking dead, right?
It was dead as a doorknob.
Just dead.
On sales.
Like the summer was the worst, right?
August, September numbers were a travesty.
Well, July and June were disgusting too. I mean, they were multi-decade. Like we got 30-year lows. We've added 10 million people. I mean, it's
4,000
or
5,000 a month on Treb is nothing.
It's ridiculous. So sales are up, but I think we both noticed prices are not up.
No,
prices are not up.
The expectation from sellers is slowly getting to them. Which is good because what's great is buyers' sentiment has improved significantly with the recent rate drops since the summer.
Yep.
So they have a positive outlook. They're still hesitant to jump in because they want good value.
Well, because the houses are not cheap.
No, they're not cheap. No. So they're looking for deals. And what I always tell people is that are buying, find out when the seller bought this house. Because if they bought in 2020, 2021, their expectation is they don't want to lose money, so they're going to hold out for a higher amount.
Because they paid a lot.
Yeah. But if somebody's had this house for 10, 15 years, there's wiggle room there because they bought it for $550,000 and now they're maybe looking for 1.2, 1.3, which they're still making money. Psychologically, they're not losing.
They're not desperate to cover a mortgage.
So find out, ask your realtor, when did they buy this house? The info's there. It's available.
It's great advice.
Do some math. Just do some research. And that way, don't waste your time with an offer if somebody's going to hold.
Folks, that's golden advice. Like, get your realtor to figure out when they bought the house and what price they paid for it.
They should be doing that for you.
Absolutely. Because as Vince just said, if you bought in 2021, you paid maybe the highest price known to man.
And psychologically, I need X to get out of this thing.
Yeah, you don't want to lose money.
No.
Nobody wants to lose money. Although in condo world, they will.
They will. And pre-cons. It's a disaster.
No, Vincent is as up to date as I am on the infinite condo crash of dog crate condos.
It's going to be a gong show.
You talk to some developers sometimes about how bad it's getting, right? Like
it's getting really bad. Like we got some smaller guys wanting to finance inventory loans, which is units that haven't sold or
can't close,
or they've taken back because they can't close.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to touch this stuff.
Nobody wants to touch it.
They're garbage units. They're made like shit. They're small. Nobody wants them.
Hey, folks, look, this is the truth.
And I'm not trying to, critique the quality, but the reality is you built them for investors.
You built dog crates for people.
Exactly.
100%.
And they're shitty layouts.
Oh, and even the layouts of the buildings are shit, okay? Even some of the construction quality is shit, okay?
We talked a little bit about this, but how do condo fees go up dramatically on a new building if the quality is very good?
Well, and it's common. What Vince is saying is very common. Like you when you move in, the condo fees are $400 a month.
Yeah.
And yet somehow 5 years later they're $760.
Yeah, they're going up. They're going up 8 to 12% a year. Like it's fucking a brand new building.
Yeah, exactly. So, folks, here's the reason. The builder made sure that there was some subtle underwriting done of the condo fees. And as things went along, everybody just go, well, this needs to be fixed maybe, or this needs to be improved on, or well, I don't know how they got that security guard because we can't find a security guard for this cheap.
The hallway carpets are shit. The hallway
carpets are already disintegrating. And like all of a sudden, and about the 5-year mark, you got to do an engineering study again.
Yeah.
So that's the Condo Act in Ontario. I'm sure it's exactly the same in British Columbia. And I'm not so sure about, I think it's a little more reasonable in Alberta, but in BC, it's almost identical. You've got to do a study to make sure you've got adequate reserves. And if you don't have adequate reserves for future work that will need to be done, you got to raise the fees. Or you got to have a special...
Like, Ron, I had a client of mine, and such a nice guy, worked hard, he's in the trades, busting his ass, saved money, bought this condo. He came in a year later, says, Vince, I got to sell this thing. I said, why? He goes, every morning I got to run the water for 15 minutes before it gets hot.
What?
I said, what do you mean? He goes, yeah, the boiler is at the other end of the building. And by the time it gets hot and comes to my unit, it takes 12 to 15 minutes.
Christ almighty.
So this guy's running water for 15 minutes.
Is his own meter?
No, it's because it's water.
That pumps up the condo fees.
That pumps up the condo fees.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay. And then you walk down the hallways and he says you could hear everybody. The doors are paper thin. It's garbage. They're shitty units.
Wow. So look, this thing, you don't hear about it much, although... If you're like Vince and I, you do hear about it from insiders.
Every week.
I heard about just literally last week, a very smart individual said to me, that most recently completed building probably the most famous condo developer, most high quality, most famous condo developer in Toronto, in Ontario. He said, he says, I was approached on this and there were 70 units, 70 out of 330 that did not close because of impossibility of closing.
So that's
20%.
That's a problem.
That's a big fucking problem.
That's a $1 billion problem when you extrapolate it across all the buildings that are being...
billions and billions. You start extrapolating. So there will be... You don't hear about it today because, by the way, this famous developer They made sure nobody heard about that. He knew about it because he's an insider.
Yeah.
Okay. But there's nobody in the media knows that 70 of those units didn't close, or people refused to close. Just people said, "Keep my deposit. I'm fucking off." Okay, I don't want.
And the lender, the commercial lender wants their money. So
the guy who financed it.
So
Yeah.
here's the problem: you've taken these units back.
Excuse me.
You got your 20% from your buyer.
Mm-hmm.
He's basically given up on it. And what do? Do you sell it at market, or do you sell it at the number to make you break even? And that means you lower the value of all the other units if you got to unload it at a discount. It's a real problem.
Well, Vince, you and I know what the ultimate answer is.
It's going to be a shit show.
The ultimate answer is that you will sell it to get out of the building. If you're the developer and you're stuck with 70 units that you have to get inventory financing on, so your condo corporation can close, you can satisfy it's covenants. We call it covenants in our business. You've got a lender who says, when the building's finished, you got X number of days to pay us off.
And 70 units, let's say $500,000, it's $35 million.
It's a pretty expensive builder. This was more like $55 million. Okay.
All right. So they're more expensive units.
Expensive. Now, this, again, is possibly the top builder. So they don't have any trouble. They got money of their own.
They'll figure it out.
They got easy access to financing. But that's 20% of the units. So at a great builder. So what the hell's going to happen
with the shitty builders?
The shitty builder with all tiny dog crate condos in a bad location, or in a location where the building right across the street that's 2 years older is selling for $850 a square foot and they're $1,450. What the fuck's going to happen? We've touched on this stuff before for the audience. We've talked about this before. We don't want to beat the shit out of it, but I am guaranteeing you're going to hear more and more. That's for sure.
It'll be an ongoing issue.
Yep. So one of the reasons I'd love to have Vince on the show is that he is involved with something that the City of Toronto, and he's doing it in the City of Toronto.
Yep.
Something the City of Toronto has said is the cornerstone of their future development of the city. Because let's face it, Toronto's pretty fucking full. Although there's places you and I drive by all the time that they could be building on that they haven't been building on for 20 years.
Exactly.
Like, can anybody explain to me why they're building a fucking concert venue on the Downsview lands when it should be housing? Like, what the fuck?
And it's temporary. It's a temporary concert venue waiting until they develop it.
Which has been available for 15 years.
Well, that's the Allen East lands has been available since 2009.
Right.
And that's been in the hands of Create TO, and they haven't put a fucking shovel in the ground. As a matter of fact, a couple months ago, they just repaved the area where the ambulance
where they should be building houses.
Where the ambulance is doing their training.
Yeah. So there was an airport, a military airport in Toronto that got shut down. It's in a place called Downsview. It's right in the heart of the city, really.
Right off the highway, north of Yorkdale.
It's just off the famous 401. It's absolutely should be used.
Subway stations on north and south end of the.
Well, they moved out. The airport moved out 25 years ago.
Yeah,
Vince, right?
More than that.
30 years ago. Okay, so they've done fuck all with it. Okay, so we have trouble with the city bureaucracy. But let me talk about what Vince is involved with, which is actually what municipalities and what the provincial government theoretically supports and what the federal government pushes all the time, which is called gentle density. So what's gentle density? Instead of just building these huge condo towers full of dog crate condos that everybody hates and they're only meant for people who want to rent, or they were only really meant for Airbnb, to tell the truth. But so everybody hates them. You can't possibly raise a family there. Like, folks, you cannot raise a family in 450 square feet.
No way.
You could barely have recreational sex. I mean, seriously, you
need hammocks for more than two people.
It's insanity. Okay, so the only thing those places are good for is if you're Airbnb, you just go out to be a tourist and then go back and sleep. Okay. Can't have visitors. It's too small. 450 square feet, too small.
It's very small.
Can't have visitors. Barely could have somebody over to do whatever you need to do with. And it's nuts. But here's the problem. Gentle density. Gentle density is the idea of taking a single family lot and turning it into 4 or 5 decent units. And Vince, that's what you've been doing.
That's what we've been doing. We've been doing it now for 2.5, close to 3 years. We are repurposing single family into 4 units, 5 units. All these units are more than 2 bedrooms. Some are 3.
Hear that, folks?
Okay, they're
2 bedrooms.
minimum 875 square feet
Wow.
to as much as 1,300 square feet.
Like an old-fashioned bungalow.
Old-fashioned bungalow. And we've gone through this process, and I was so excited a year ago when the feds came out with their Housing Accelerator Fund because it was designed to help expedite the process.
You were the poster child.
I was working the model, okay? We were testing this whole issue. They're great units. They're beautiful units, all by code, fire rated. Everything is zoned to the envelope. Whatever the envelope allowed, that's what we built. We never went in for a minor variance to get it bigger than it needed to be.
So just for the folks who are listening, what you're talking about is building in a way that doesn't require vast amount of committee, amount of no committee of adjustment, no minimal bureaucracy,
minimal building within what the city allows you to build
on that. So they tear the old one down. You're automatically allowed a tiny increase on the old one. Okay,
yep.
You never asked to go beyond the increase.
Nope.
So you were always within the boundaries every time.
So, you mentioned it. The laneway suites have been around for about 9 years.
Yeah, 9 or 10 years. Yeah.
So you figure the city has a good test project for 9 years where they could identify opportunities to increase efficiency, figure out how they're going to roll out the garden suite program, which is now 2 years old, and make this thing more efficient. It has been hell.
Pure hell.
Pure hell. Nobody's aligned. Inspectors don't have a clue what they're looking at.
So we're talking about
the City of Toronto.
Talking about the City of Toronto, who the mayor, who changes costumes twice a day, but the mayor and the council are 100% in favor of this. They have said they have changed the bylaws. They have changed. They talk about it endlessly. We must build gentle density on transit routes, and all of your stuff is on transit routes.
It's all on transit routes. We're near major transit hubs, so everybody could walk to a subway.
Perfect.
Pretty much.
Perfect.
They're great units. They're big units for families.
You got a 3-bedroom. You can raise a family.
And they're not a dog crate condo. It's double the size of dog crate condos, and the whole permit planning process takes a long time. When you're repurposing these projects and you have a main house that you're converting to 3 units and a laneway suite or a garden suite, you got 2 permits.
Oh, Jesus.
And those 2 permits might go to 2 examiners.
And 2 different inspectors.
And 2 different inspectors.
Oh, and they'll rotate the inspectors.
And they'll rotate them throughout the project, so you now have to teach the next guy or next person what the project's all about. And the reality is it's just delays, and it's not easy. Now, we're pushing through. We really want to test this because we really believe we are doing good for the community.
Of course you are.
And we're building the units that are necessary to raise families in a city. And what's frustrating is that nobody talks to each other.
It's the bureaucracy.
The bureaucracy.
Fights the policy.
The bureaucracy is fighting it. I don't understand. I sat with Mike Cole, who's a deputy mayor. I said, Mike, why don't you have a dedicated team that just deals with laneway suites and garden suites?
Just this gentle density expansion.
You go to the Ministry of Transportation. They have an express line for dealers, right?
Yep.
Why should I sit behind a guy who needs a deck?
He's building a deck.
Okay. Why do I got to sit behind the guy who needs a parking pad?
So the guy who's building a parking pad, you're standing in line behind that person, and yet you're trying to provide 5 family-sized units in the heart of Toronto, which is what the city has been begging for.
Yes.
And they could give a fuck to help.
They don't care.
They don't care.
Nobody's pushing it through. And the city's just, you would think that the laneway program, which is a 9-year program, would teach them some stuff.
Nothing. That program was unsuccessful. There's hardly any laneway suites.
And it's such a great product. I think many families that are becoming intergenerational families could benefit from it. You got generational families that could buy a home and live in 3 different units.
All right, so let's make a couple points clear here. Vince isn't doing this as a charity. It's great for the community, but he's going to make money on it, okay? And by the way, folks, isn't that what we want? We want free enterprise using private financing, using their own money to build community supportive homes, because that's how you can build a ton of them.
And one thing I want to point out, Ron, we're not displacing any tenants.
No.
Okay,
no.
we're buying a single-family home
That was by owner occupied.
that was owner-occupied, and we're turning it into a multi-unit home.
So you're taking a spot where maybe two older people were living out their time in that house.
We're increasing the rental supply.
And you're increasing the rental supply. You're building family-sized units. You might turn that from 2 people into 12 or 15 people with kids if you got the kids, and you're doing it in a way that's right aligned. It's in the heart of the city. It's got great facilities. You can walk to a street where there's all kinds of restaurants, all kinds of shops. You can get on the subway. You can go to your work. It's literally what it's all supposed to be, and the city fights you. Not that the city hall says it's good, but the bureaucracy
sucks. It sucks.
Like, folks, there's stuff Vince told me about, like firewalls and tiny hallways and double egress. You were telling me about
double egress. You need to have emergency services get to the back unit, so you got to have proper access to the back. Like, you got to make sure everything's to code. Like fire separation. You got to have
expensive.
All expensive. These are built to code. They're legal units. They're not, like fake units they're illegal.
The rat shit hole in the basement.
Yeah, these are brand new units, and it's sad because we need it. They're better than the condo in the sky that 100%. Can't house a family, 100%. And it's just been a challenge. But we're going to push through. We're going to continue fighting, and hopefully things change.
Is it fair to say two important points I want to raise? It's also, you have to be within a certain length of space to a fire hydrant.
Yes. So you got to be 140 feet from a fire hydrant.
That ain't much.
No. And you can't be more than 140 feet to the back because hoses on fire trucks are only so long.
Okay. So hear me out. Let the viewers understand this. That what ends up happening is because of, even though the government keeps telling us we want this, they create barriers.
Yes.
So that in reality, I think it's also fair to say, in reality, it's because if you're not within 140 feet, I guess you're fucked. Okay? Can't do it. So what ends up happening, folks, is the builder builds a monster home and sells it for $4 million. Okay? And again, there's just 2 or 3 or 4 people in it. Because you don't have to care about the fire hydrant.
It's cheaper to build.
Cheaper to build, much cheaper to build.
Yep.
Okay? And it's faster to build. And it's easier to get financing because it's hard to get financing on your thing.
Correct.
Because the banks don't understand it.
No. Okay. And I run a mix, so we offer the construction financing on these things because we understand it, and we love them. We love these units because they're income producing and they're in need. And 2 and 3 bedroom units have a more stable tenant base.
Yeah, those people stay.
They stay.
You got there's no reason for them to unless they can afford to buy their own home.
Yeah.
They can stay for years and years.
Exactly.
And there's no rent eviction. They're brand new.
They're brand new.
And no one's like, it's actually, and then you're not, the guy who buys it as a fourplex keeps it as a fourplex.
That's right.
So he's never going to say, hey, I need to evict you all now
because
I'm selling the house.
All individual HVAC units, all individual in-suite laundry. They're brand new units.
It's literally everything you want in downtown Toronto, in the city of Toronto. Proper use of density, beautiful units, and the bureaucracy of the city fights you tooth and nail. That's reality.
Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to get that out of the way because I think it's really important. Every program that you ever hear politicians run out, in the background, there's a bunch of bureaucrats, there's a bunch of people at City Hall, there's a bunch of red tape waiting to fuck you up.
Yeah.
That's the reality of all this.
That's the key.
And until we find a way to push through the insanity of the red tape and the bureaucracy, we're going to be in for a fight. Which brings us to my favorite part of the program. What the actual fuck? So I'm going to lay this on. What the actual fuck is wrong with the federal government that wants to send 19 million people a check for $250?
What's funny is the media has criticized Doug Ford for doing that.
I criticized him
right?
for $200.
So they just... Personally, Ron, I really believe this is simply a test to see if their polling numbers go up. And if they don't, I think that our fearless leader will probably step down.
Hey, I don't care about that part of it, but I got to say this. Everybody out there who's listening and watching,
inflation will not move in the right direction.
Let's get this clear. It's $7 billion. All this bullshit they're doing about, hey, It's another. They copy Doug Ford. They say, hey, we're going to take the GST off beer, pretzels, potato chips, candies, snacks, and for Christmas
And Christmas trees.
Christmas trees. Like they're literally fucked in the head. Okay, like it's going to cost businesses across Canada about $60 million to rekey all those systems to not charge the fucking GST at the cashier. So, and then it's only gone for 2 months. It's literally a gang of idiots thought this up. But the $250 a head for 19 million people, when it's 100% deficit, it's over $6 billion. That just becomes deficit financing. We run a deficit, folks, a deficit. Like I listened to people on a survey last night. They're walking the streets. Reporters are walking. What do you think about it? Yeah, I'd like $250. It's your money. You paid it in tax. They're just bribing you with your own fucking money. Okay, and we run a huge deficit in this country, like a $50 billion year deficit. Now it's going to go to $56 billion. Okay, and you and your kids and your grandkids are going to pay interest on that fucking check for the $250.
It's not good.
Fucking
Ron,
the worst.
I was talking to a retailer, and they said, we're going to expect a bunch of returns before December 15th.
And then buy them again.
And then people buy them again to save the tax.
So
how does this solve anything? Like, it's a fucking shit show.
Look, let's just folks, I want to end the show by saying this. When you get that check for $250, understand it's all your taxes that you paid. Why not just reduce taxes, for fuck's sakes? It's all your taxes coming back to you, and then they're going to charge you interest until you die.
Yeah.
Because if you run it, this is so important. If you're a country that runs a huge deficit and you knowingly add to the deficit by giving the voters a bribe, you're just passing on interest for eternity. That's all it is.
Now, if they wanted a real good program, we'll be quick because I know we got to run. You want to give a tax break? Cut something equal to that amount of
cut expenses,
yeah.
Cut costs.
So
okay.
Knock off GST 1% and the equivalent program that matches it. And now you got something.
Or we take all our folks at CRA, the 50,000 people who work at CRA, and we take them down to 40.
Yeah.
Then we can afford it. Okay, folks, thanks for listening. Thanks for having me on the show.
Always
Vince.
a pleasure,
We always love
Ron.
to have you. We'll see you next week.
If you like the pod, well, don't just sit there. Go to YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and all the other ones and like the pod. And don't forget to subscribe so we can keep being angry at mortgages and swearing about mortgages. Angry Mortgage could use your support.